And the troops are in and out here. Blue? Oh, sorry about that, yeah. Yeah, sorry I didn't let you know sooner, but I didn't know until I got up, actually. When was Thanksgiving? A week before? My mom had all this turkey and she saved for my dogs. And I thought, it smells good to me. Yeah, so I ate some not so good turkey and didn't want to leave home on Tuesday. So anyway, sorry about that. Or, yeah, you're probably happy about that, actually. So what I'm going to do today is probably finish off the market failure. We'll talk a little bit about externalities. And I graded your papers, and it took forever. It takes, there's about, I don't know, 35 of them or so. And so it takes me about a half an hour to mark each one. And there's something wrong with me. I can't read it without editing. And so I try to back off on that, maybe edit for the first couple of paragraphs or something, but I don't know. So read it, think about it, and provide the mark, so you'll see them all marked up. And because of that, some people write extremely well, and writing is something that you can learn. And so I think a lot of people need to learn how to write a little bit better. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I can't help myself, grammar and that kind of stuff. And I'll recommend some sources, just because I don't know what I am. I'm a nice teacher, thanks. 100% for her. Okay, I, for fun, read grammar books, so now you know, loser. But anyway, there's a book called Eats, Shoots, and Leaps. They're easy to read, they're interesting. I find them interesting. But I would highly recommend that you get them because they can help you write a tremendous, it'll improve your writing tremendously. So I'm going to go over some of the things in here later. And so it's, you need to go out and buy them and read them before you do your next assignment. So I don't go crazy with the editing. Okay. So, where are we? Okay, so externalities. So we were talking about an externality having reciprocity. You always have two players, right? Somebody who's lit the fire and somebody who's breathing the smoke. So there's a problem. There's an externality. One party did not consult with the next party, and there are external costs placed upon them. So the question is, how do we remedy those situations? And the way we typically do it in North America, more so in the States, is to sue people. You take them to court and you get every cent that you possibly can. That is not an efficient solution. And you can understand why people do it, because they have a lot to gain. But if we're talking about resources and the environment and solving problems and using taxpayers' dollars to do that, then we really want to find a way to be efficient in solving those problems. Okay? So the question is, how do we internalize the damage? And how do we reach the most efficient solution? Okay. So, I'm going to give you an example, and then we will talk about how to reach that. And this is an example, this is a real example of a situation in Saskatchewan right now. And it has to do with fire, of course. So you have the province, oops, it's not that, well, whatever, you get the idea. Oh, that's pretty bad. There's Lake Athabasca, there's Uranium City and Stony Rapids and Clough Lake and Wollaston Lake and all these small communities. The province of Saskatchewan, in terms of fire resources, because we only have so many tankers, so many crews, so much money to spend, has divided the province into sort of 3 zones, and they roughly match the population. So the zones are, we observe and do nothing, or do nothing. Then there's a moderate response. And then there's full attack. So where do you suppose, what kind of criteria do you think they would use to come up with these zones and the way they would fight fire? What would be important if we're spending public dollars to fight fire? What are we trying to do? What do we want to protect?
A larger amount of tax base you guys are paying for?
Yeah, infrastructure and people. People number one, okay? So they have values and priorities. Priority one is people and safety. Priority number two is infrastructure. Infrastructure and resources, I guess we could say. Okay, so those are the two main points. If we're going to spend money fighting fire, we're going to protect people, number one. So of course that is full attack. If people are in danger, say there's a fire right outside of Prince Albert, they're going to throw everything they've got at that fire because they don't want the fire to burn down houses, kill people, damage infrastructure in larger centers. So the full response zone is all around here where the population is, okay? So the full attack or full response zone, populated areas. And in some areas, say you go over here to Candle Lake, well the population there is quite big, so there's going to be full response within that area. In areas up in the north, we typically have an observe do nothing zone. Why is that? What do you know about northern Saskatchewan?
Population is low.
Yeah, and
Infrastructure's low.
it's like zero in most places. You have these tiny enclaves where people live and, you know, really small communities. You get up past here and you don't even have roads anymore. You do have the odd fly-in mine, you know, there's Key Lake and other, like Cigar Lake is going to come online. So in those areas, those specific areas, there is a 20-kilometer radius within which the government will respond to the fire. If it's outside that area, they do nothing. The trees, it's natural. Fire is natural. They burn down, they come back. That's the way it works. So they're not going to protect any resources up here, not forest resources, because the forest resources aren't worth anything. From an ecological perspective, fire is natural, so we need fire. So this is the way the province has decided how to protect as much of the resources and people as possible. Because what do we have? Limited resources. Right? There's only so much money every year to spend on fire resources. So we're talking about equipment, crews, air attack, which is super expensive, remote sensing, that kind of stuff, GIS. So the economic question is, how do you allocate those resources? And it depends on the values. So there are a number of ways. You think about it, you can spend some of that money before a fire begins, right? We have this idea that prescribed burning or thinning, if we treat the forest through cutting down the trees, thinning, taking away the fuel, we can reduce the chance that a fire is going to burn somebody's house down or burn out a community. So that's one thing, and this is what the Forest Service or the Saskatchewan government can do because they manage and are in control of the forest. So they could do that all around these areas, or they could encourage the companies like the mines who work in those areas to do it themselves, right? So there's prescribed burning and thinning, or you can change the way you develop your buildings. So I guess we could say retrofit, or like change building codes. So if we were to rebuild these houses or get people to retrofit them, take off the wooden roofs and put on tile, for example. Take away the wood piles from the house, less convenient, can't grab a log, you have to walk a little ways away. You clear all the trees from around your property, so that's an individual cost. So if there's a fire, can you see how this would be considered an externality? Say a fire starts for whatever reason. Is it an externality? Yeah, there's costs that people have not considered, right? So they're external costs to the individuals. They were not considered in the decision-making process. So as a society, how do we solve that problem? What's the best way? What would you say, what would you recommend from an economic perspective to solve this problem? Depends on what?
Depends on pockets.
On pockets?
The municipalities over there.
Okay, but what should it depend on? Think like an economist. What do we want to do?
Give people incentives to make sure their property isn't like
Yeah.
at risk for burning down, I guess.
Yeah, through policy, we want to give people incentives to act in a responsible way. What else do we want to look for? What should be a key criteria of evaluating any response or any policy or any action? So one of the things I mentioned on day one, there's 7 key things that you need to know throughout the class, and they keep coming up again and again. This is one of those things. Incentives was one of them too. You guys just look so bored. This is so sad. So what do you think? If you're an economist and you were charged with this problem, or any problem similarly, could be on agricultural land, right? Using fertilizer. The Percy Schmeiser case where the seed blows off into the wind and causes externalities. That's an externality as well. So how do you go about solving this problem from a public perspective?
Well, in any case, in that problem should be persons or those institutions, organizations who actually could kind of benefit from the forest or something like that, or this disaster working.
Okay, so you
like
said benefits.
Expenses, and who actually takes more money from the forest or whatever. I have no idea from this.
So you're saying
They
whoever
are
benefits
kind
from the forest
They
should
kind
pay?
of should not pay, but at least contribute to strategic plans or something like that.
The question I'm asking is more simple. What do we need to do? Minimize cost, right? It's all about coming up with an efficient solution. That's a very simple answer. So how do we do that? We know what the cost of fighting fire is.
Just do yourself.
They tally it up every year, right? Okay. So if we look at the total cost spent by individuals and the province, and we want to minimize that cost, we can look at the cost of this too. What's the cost of prescribed burning? You know what it takes for a crew to go out there and to monitor the fire, light the fire, put it out, make sure that it accomplishes your objectives, don't burn anybody's house down in the process, or you go out and thin trees. You have to do that every so many years. We know what the cost is. We know what the estimated costs are over time. We can come up with a figure for that.